Ethan Hayes had always lived quietly, almost like he was watching life from a distance. He worked as a trail designer in a small Oregon town called Maple Ridge, a place filled with forests, cafes, and people who knew each other's routines. Ethan didn't mind being quiet, but he often wished he could speak more freely, especially around one particular person, the woman who made him feel nervous and alive at the same time. Claire Thompson was the town librarian, known for a soft voice, warm personality, and a smile that seemed to melt away stress the moment someone saw it. People liked her instantly, but Ethan felt something deeper, something that tightened his chest whenever she looked at him. For months, he visited the library every Friday, returning books he barely read, because he spent most of his time thinking about what he wanted to say to her. Each week he rehearsed conversations in his head, and each week he lost his courage. The moment he saw her standing behind the desk, Claire always tried to start small conversations with him. She asked about his weekend plans, his favorite authors, and whether he liked the book he borrowed. Her tone was friendly, gentle, and patient. She never pushed him to speak more than he wanted to. She simply treated him as someone worth noticing. And for Ethan, who had spent years feeling almost invisible, that meant everything. Still, whenever she smiled at him, he felt his thoughts scramble and his voice shrink. One windy afternoon in autumn, the library felt especially cozy. Leaves kept tapping against the windows, and the soft yellow lights made the whole room feel warm. Ethan walked in wearing his usual grey jacket and holding a book he had finished in just 2 days. Mostly because Claire had recommended it. He stood near her desk, taking a moment to steady his breathing. Today, he told himself, he would finally ask her something real. Not about books, not about return dates, but about her. Claire noticed him right away. Her smile brightened, and she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Hey, Ethan," she said cheerfully. "You're early today." He nodded, though his throat felt tight. "Yeah, I wanted to ask you something." His fingers tapped lightly against the book. He hated how nervous he sounded, but Claire didn't laugh or tease. She simply tilted her head gently, waiting for him to continue. "Ask me what?" she said with curiosity. Ethan opened his mouth, hoping the words would come out. Maybe he would ask if she wanted to grab a coffee. Maybe he would ask if she liked working at the library. Maybe he would ask anything that showed he cared about her in a quiet, sincere way. But before he could speak, someone called Claire's name from across the library. She turned to look, and the moment slipped away like water through fingers. By the time she handled the interruption and turned back, Ethan had dropped his gaze, his courage fading. Claire felt a small ache in her chest. She could see he'd been trying to say something important. She also knew he might need a little help. She watched him take a step back, ready to leave. But before he did, she spoke softly. "Ethan, whatever you wanted to ask, you can tell me anytime." He gave a small nod, almost grateful, but his voice stayed quiet. "Maybe next time." Claire watched him walk out into the fading afternoon light, feeling a pull she couldn't ignore. She didn't fully understand why he made her heart flutter the way he did, but she knew there was something rare in the way he looked at her, gentle, careful, almost unsure that he was allowed to feel something. After Ethan left, Claire rearranged the returned books on her desk, but her mind stayed on him. She thought about the way he hesitated, how his eyes carried a softness that most people missed because he rarely looked directly at anyone. She thought about his quiet good nature, how respectful and attentive he always was, and how he seemed to open up just a tiny bit each week. She realized something simple but clear. Ethan wasn't just shy. He was someone who felt deeply, but didn't always believe he deserved to show it. As she closed the library that evening, Claire decided she was done waiting for him to find the perfect moment. Sometimes life didn't give people perfect moments. Sometimes someone had to create one. The next Friday, she planned to do exactly that. She didn't know what would happen. She didn't know how he would react. But she knew one thing for certain. Ethan Hayes had been hiding behind his quietness for too long. And Claire wasn't afraid to help him step out of it. She whispered to herself while locking the door, "He's a little shy. But maybe I can fix that situation." Outside, the sky shifted into a soft purple sunset, as if the whole town were waiting for something to begin. Claire did not want another Friday to pass without making a real step toward Ethan. She had spent the whole week thinking about him, his shy smile, the way he spoke softly, the way he seemed to hold himself back even when his eyes showed he wanted to say more. She knew he needed a gentle push, something small but meaningful, something that showed she had been paying attention. So before heading to the library that morning, she stopped at Harper's Cafe and ordered his favorite drink, hot chocolate with a hint of cinnamon. She reached the library early, placed the warm cup on her desk, and waited. Ethan walked in right on time, holding a returned book against his chest. Claire noticed the small rise and fall of his shoulders as he breathed in deeply, almost like he was preparing himself for something. She didn't wait for him to speak. Instead, she gently pushed the cup toward him. "This is for you," she said, her smile soft. Ethan froze for half a second. "For me?" "Yes," she replied. "You always order this before coming here." He looked stunned, like he didn't expect anyone to notice something so small about his life. His fingers wrapped around the warm cup, and for the first time, he didn't look away. You pay attention," he said quietly. "I do," she answered. "More than you think." Ethan's cheeks warmed with a shy blush. Claire could see the way her words affected him. He stood a little straighter. His voice sounded a little more confident. They talked for a while. Not about anything big, but about simple things: his job designing hiking trails, a book she was reading, a festival the town was planning for next month. Even though the topics were ordinary, something special grew between them. Ethan spoke more than usual, sometimes stumbling over his words but recovering faster each time. He laughed softly, and Claire felt her heart lift every time she heard it. For a moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the library. But just as everything was flowing naturally, Claire's eyes fell on something she hadn't noticed before. A folded letter poked out of Ethan's jacket pocket. It was handwritten, the kind of note someone carefully sends when they want to reach the heart. She didn't know why it bothered her so quickly. Maybe she feared it was from someone important in his life. A girlfriend, someone from his past, someone who already held a place she wished she could fill. She tried to ignore the twist in her stomach and kept smiling, but her thoughts were no longer steady. Every time Ethan moved, the letter rustled lightly, reminding her again and again that she knew nothing about his personal life. Ethan didn't notice her distraction. He was too busy trying to keep up the courage he finally found. After a long, warm conversation, he stood from the chair. She expected him to leave quickly the way he always did, but this time he hesitated. "I enjoyed talking to you," he said softly. "I did too," Claire replied. He nodded slowly. "I'd like to talk to you again. Soon." That simple sentence made her heart flutter. She forced herself not to glance at the letter again. She didn't want him to see the doubt that had formed inside her. "You can talk to me any time," she said gently. "Whenever you want." Ethan smiled, shy, but more open than she had ever seen him. His eyes carried gratitude, relief, and something warm she couldn't quite name. He turned to leave, walking with a softness that showed he was still nervous, but also hopeful. After he left, Claire leaned against her desk and closed her eyes for a moment. She felt happy, yes, but also strangely uneasy. She didn't know why that one letter made her feel like she might lose something she never even had. She shook her head, reminding herself that she barely knew Ethan's personal life. Of course he had people who wrote to him. Everyone did. But a small fear kept whispering. What if someone already means something to him? She pushed the thought aside and forced herself to return to work. But the rest of the day passed slowly. Every time she picked up a book or helped a visitor, her mind drifted back to Ethan's quiet voice, his grateful smile, the warmth in his eyes, and that letter. That evening, while closing the library, she looked at the empty doorway where he usually entered. She touched the edge of her desk, the place where his cup had sat earlier. Something inside her heart felt unsettled, restless. She wasn't used to longing like this, longing for someone who still felt half like a mystery. Still, she told herself one simple truth. Ethan had spoken more today than in all the weeks before. He was trying, slowly, quietly, bravely, and she wanted to meet him halfway. Even if the letter scared her, even if she didn't know what it meant. She promised herself she wouldn't let fear stop her from discovering where this connection could go. She whispered to the empty room. He's opening up. I can feel it. Outside, the evening wind moved through the trees, soft and restless, as if carrying the beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. Claire tried to push away the memory of the letter she saw in Ethan's pocket, but the image kept returning all weekend. She replayed every moment they shared. The warm drink she gave him, the quiet smile he offered, the way he almost seemed proud of himself for speaking more freely. Everything felt gentle and hopeful, until her eyes caught that folded note. She didn't understand why it shook her so quickly. Maybe because it reminded her she didn't truly know much about his life outside the library. By Monday morning, she expected to see him walk in with his usual shy steps. Maybe even with that new spark of confidence she noticed last week. But the door stayed quiet. The library felt different without him, less warm, less alive. She told herself he was probably busy with work. But as the hours passed, she started to worry in a way she couldn't explain. Tuesday came. No Ethan. Wednesday came. Still nothing. By Thursday afternoon, Claire found herself glancing at the door every few minutes, hoping to hear the small bell ring. She told herself not to get carried away, but her heart didn't listen. She missed his presence, the way he stood close to the shelves, the way he always paused before speaking, the rare but soft laugh she was learning to love. When Friday finally arrived, she came to work earlier than usual. She tried to focus, but her mind kept drifting to the same questions. Was he avoiding her? Did the letter mean something important? Did someone else already hold a piece of his heart? Late in the afternoon, the door finally opened. Claire's breath caught the moment she saw him. Ethan stepped inside quietly, holding the same letter she had seen before. His expression was serious, thoughtful, almost emotional, unlike the shy spark he had shown earlier. He approached the desk slowly. "Hi, Claire," he said, his voice steady but gentle. She nodded, trying to hide the worry that had been sitting inside her all week. "I didn't see you these past days," she said, keeping her tone light. "I know," he replied. "I needed some time to think." Her heart tightened. Think about what? Ethan held up the folded letter, almost like it weighed more than paper should. "About this, and about you." Those last two words made her pulse quicken. "Me?" she whispered. He nodded. "This letter is from my mother. She wrote asking if I was seeing someone. She said she hoped I wasn't letting life pass me by because I'm too afraid to speak." He let out a breath. "She knows me too well." Claire relaxed a little, though she tried not to show it. She had imagined someone else, someone romantic, someone who already meant something to him. but hearing it was from his mother eased a pressure she hadn't wanted to admit she felt. I realized she was right, Ethan continued. I've been hiding behind shyness for too long. I keep waiting for life to feel easier. But it never will unless I start trying. Claire's eyes softened. And what did you tell her? Ethan looked directly at her. For once, his gaze didn't drop or drift. It stayed strong, steady, full of something deep and sincere. I told her there's someone I want to know better. Someone kind. Someone who makes me feel braver. Claire's breath caught again, but this time it was from something warm blooming inside her. Before she could say anything, a sudden winter storm rolled through town. The wind pushed against the windows, rattling the glass, and the lights flickered. Claire turned her head toward the windows, watching the trees sway sharply under the cold wind. When she turned back, Ethan had stepped a little closer unintentionally, but close enough that she felt the change in the space between them. I don't want to waste time anymore, he said softly. I don't want to walk away from things that matter. The lights flickered again, dimming. Claire's heartbeat echoed loudly in the quiet room. Ethan. Before she could finish, the power went out completely. Darkness wrapped around them, broken only by the faint grey light from the storm outside. For a moment, neither of them spoke, but the silence felt full of everything they hadn't said yet. Claire could feel him standing near, close enough to sense his breath. Are you okay? He asked softly. Yes, she whispered. Are you? I think so, he said, though I wasn't expecting to talk about all this in the dark. She let out a tiny laugh. Life never gives perfect timing. No, he agreed. But I didn't want to wait another day. The power remained out, and the storm outside softened slightly, as if giving them a small, fragile moment of stillness. Claire's fingers brushed lightly against the desk, grounding herself. She wanted to speak, to tell him how much she appreciated his honesty, how she had missed him all week, how the letter had frightened her in ways she didn't want to admit. But before she could form the words, he spoke again, voice low but steady. Claire, I'm trying. I really am. I just needed you to know that. In the darkness, his vulnerability wrapped around her like warmth, and she realized something quietly powerful. This moment, without lights, without distractions, without distance, was exactly what they both needed. The storm continued to hum outside, gentle now, like the world was finally holding its breath for them. The library stayed dark for a long moment, and in that darkness, Ethan and Claire stood quietly, listening to the storm ease into a softer rhythm outside. The wind no longer pushed against the windows the way it had before. Instead, it felt like the world was calming down, giving them space to finally speak without fear. Claire could feel her heart beat loud in her chest, not from fear, but from the weight of everything Ethan had confessed before the lights went out. She took a slow breath. Ethan, you didn't have to tell me all that in one night. He let out a soft, shaky laugh. Maybe I didn't, but I didn't want to run away again. I do that too much. Claire stepped slightly closer, careful, giving him time to adjust. You're not running now. I'm trying not to, he whispered. I'm trying to be better than the person who hides everything. His honesty touched her deeply. She could hear the vulnerability in his voice, the years of quiet hesitations, the fear of disappointing people, the fear of saying the wrong thing. But standing here with him in the dark, she didn't see a man who lacked courage. She saw someone learning to trust his own heart for the first time. Before she could speak again, the lights flickered back on with a soft hum. The sudden brightness filled the room, and when their eyes met, something shifted. Without the darkness between them, everything felt clearer. Claire could finally see the nervous determination on Ethan's face, and he could see the softness in hers. He took a breath. I meant what I said earlier. Her voice was gentle. Which part? That. I want to know you better. Not just as the person who checks out my books. Not just as someone I admire from a distance. His voice wavered slightly as he continued. I want something real. Something honest. Claire's heart warmed. She stepped closer until only a small space separated them. Ethan, you don't have to change who you are to have something real. Being shy isn't a flaw. Being quiet isn't weakness. I know, he said, looking down briefly. But I also know I've let fear stop me from living fully. She reached out slowly, giving him time to step back if he needed. When her hand touched his, he didn't move away. He held onto her gently, like he was afraid of holding too tight, but grateful for the connection. You're brave, she said softly. Braver than you think. He shook his head lightly, eyes warm. I'm only brave because you make me feel like I can be. For a moment, neither of them moved. They simply stood there, holding on to the beginning of something new. Something delicate. Something that came from trust rather than boldness. Outside, the storm had turned into a soft drizzle, tapping lightly against the windows. The library, which had felt cold and empty earlier, now felt warm, almost safe. Ethan looked at her hand in his and swallowed. Claire, I want to take you out sometime. Not just for a drink. I want a real date. Something simple but honest. Something that matters. Her chest tightened with emotion. She had waited so long for him to say something like this, but hearing it out loud felt even more beautiful than she imagined. I would like that, she said, her voice steady but full of feeling. Relief washed over his face, softening his features. He looked almost younger, lighter, as if a quiet weight had finally lifted from his shoulders. I wasn't sure if you'd want that, he admitted. I thought maybe I didn't have a chance. You always had a chance, she whispered. You just didn't know it. He let out a breath that sounded like gratitude. Claire squeezed his hand gently. For the first time, Ethan didn't look away or hide behind his shy smile. He looked directly at her, steady and sincere. I'm glad I didn't let fear stop me this time, he said. So am I, she replied. The room felt still but in a peaceful way. The lights glowed softly around them, reflecting off the wooden shelves. Everything felt warm and inviting, as if the library itself approved of what was happening. After a long, quiet moment, Ethan spoke again. There's something about you. Something that makes me want to try harder. To show up more. To be someone who doesn't fade into the background. You don't fade, she said quickly. You never did. Not to me. He lifted her hand slightly, almost shyly. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for letting me, she whispered. The storm outside faded completely, leaving behind